At the time of editing this video, it has been officially 7 days since graduating from college and earning my bachelor's degree. And honestly, it hasn't felt at all like how I expected it would. I mean, I just completed one of the most challenging, if not the most challenging accomplishments of my entire life. So I feel like I should logically feel overcome with joy at the fact that it's now finally over. And while I do feel a sense of relief, particularly about no longer having to spend my weekends and evenings doing countless homework assignments and readings, I find myself mostly feeling a deep sense of dread about the whole thing. For 4 years, I focused all of my time and effort on getting my degree, so much so that the moment college was over, I immediately felt so lost. Not necessarily because I didn't have a plan, but more so because the thing by which I structured my entire life was no longer there. And because I hadn't actually really thought much about graduation before it happened, it felt like such a jarring and sudden conclusion to the thing that I had been doing not only during college, but, for my entire life. I mean, school has always been the backdrop for everything. Since kindergarten, there's always been another year or semester, or more recently, another test or another paper to think about. And in college, even when I was really tired and it was really hard, at least I knew what the next step was. But now that it's all over, that nothingness is kind of scary, honestly. And so now, in my enormous amount of free time, I find myself asking a lot of questions that I hadn't really considered before. Like, who am I without school? And I know that might sound kind of dramatic, but I mean, really, what does my life look like without that structure? Without deadlines and professors and grades and, all the college stuff. And it's weird because when you're in college, everything is framed around the idea of the future. People are always asking you, what's your major, or what do you plan to do after you graduate? So you get used to talking about the future as if it's just the thing you'll figure out later. But now that later is here, and I've realized that I spent so long preparing for it that I never actually pictured much what it would look like. And here's the part that no one really told me about graduation, which is that it is kind of an identity crisis. Because for years, my purpose was clear. Just get through college, get your degree. But now that I have it, I guess I'm just supposed to know what to do next. And I mean, some people do. A lot of my peers walked off that stage with jobs lined up or grad school plans locked in. But for me, and I'm sure for many of us, it just hasn't been that simple. And honestly, even if you do have something lined up, it can still feel quite overwhelming because life outside of school is just very different. There's fewer check boxes, fewer people checking in on you. You have to start creating your own structure and your own meaning, and that's scary. But it can also be kind of exciting because what I've started to realize, even just in this past week, is that maybe this feeling of being lost isn't a sign that something's wrong. Maybe it's just what it feels like to start figuring out who you are and what you want to do on your own terms. And what feels like for the first time, I get to choose. Not just what job or where I want to live, but how I want to spend my time and what kind of person I want to be. And yeah, there's still a lot I don't know, and I do still feel a good amount of fear and doubt, but I think that's part of it and a natural part of being in between chapters. So when I was asked to give the speech at my department's convocation ceremony, I didn't really know what to say. I mean, I definitely wasn't gonna give some generic motivational speech because for me that just wouldn't really feel honest. So instead, I decided I wanted to speak on being in this place, being in a kind of messy life transition, but feeling hopeful that now you have control over your own future. And while I do still feel pretty lost, I do think I was able to deliver that message. So here's what I decided to say.
If you asked my closest friends to describe me, they would probably say I'm the most type A person they've ever met. Even from a young age, I was a full-time overthinker, and that meant that I always had my career path all planned out. At around age 10, my childhood dogs, Izzy and Lester, were naturally my best friends. So I set my sights then on becoming a veterinarian. When I realized that would consist of doing a lot of really gross things, I thought, well, maybe this isn't the path for me. When I turned 14, my career goals had shifted, this time to becoming a neurosurgeon. Honestly, looking back, this decision wasn't so much about personal desire, but more about a deep-seated urge to prove myself and succeed in a way that would feel meaningful and worthy of respect. However, since 14-year-old Amelia had no idea what being a neurosurgeon was actually like, I eventually grew out of that goal too when it dawned on me that that would also be very gross. At 16, my dad bought a telescope and we spent nights out in the backyard, looking out at the stars. We talked all about light speed, black holes, relativity, and how the telescope even worked. It was because of those nights that, looking through the telescope, that I decided I wanted to be an astrophysicist. But that goal too was quickly crushed by my high school AP calculus class and the realization that I'm absolutely horrible at math. Since I knew I was horrible at math and anything even remotely related to it, I thought, well, being an attorney is probably my best bet. I knew then that making money was important, and well, I knew that being a lawyer would help me do that. So when I eventually got to college and started being asked the age-old question, what is your major? Political science became my habitual response. So for the last 4 years, I centered my entire identity around being an attorney. I got the internships, I went to networking events, and I even started working at a firm. I did everything I could think of to prepare myself for law school. I knew that GPA was one of the most vital parts of getting into law school, so I obsessed over it, seeing it as a personal moral failure when I didn't live up to my expectations. I worked tirelessly on my assignments, usually at the expense of spending time with my friends and family. Often, I even sacrificed my own physical and mental health, staying up late into the night studying. And I, like Dr. Cook mentioned, did all of this, like so many of you, while balancing work in order to pay my bills and keep food on the table. And so I just kept going on like this, prioritizing school before every other aspect of my life. I kept my head down and I worked as hard as I could. That was until this fall semester. I had stayed up late at the firm putting together a set of discovery responses, grilling, for a case that we had been working on nonstop for months. And as I was compiling the documents and getting everything ready to file with the court, I found myself thinking, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And then I thought, oh God, this is what I'm gonna do for the rest of my life? It might sound trivial, but it was really in that moment that I truly began deconstructing my life. Had I ever really wanted to be a veterinarian or a neurosurgeon or an astrophysicist? Did I really even want to become an attorney? It wasn't necessarily being a lawyer that I struggled with, as I know many of you are going to do that, but instead the realization that I had spent so much time investing in a version of my life that frankly I never really took any time to consider. It was that when I envisioned myself as a lawyer, I did not see myself in her at all. From then on, I noticed how many of my decisions I had made were the result of me trying so hard to construct my entire life on society's idea of a successful person. I realized that I had never let myself invest into a future I wanted, and that instead I had worked so hard to achieve goals that weren't really even mine to begin with. I continually asked myself, who will I be when I can no longer hide behind academia and I actually have to live the life I have built? So now, today, is sort of the day for all of us to ask ourselves what kind of life we're going to live from this day forward. I hope that all of you will choose your life rather than be subjected to it. I hope that in whatever you decide to do, whether it be becoming lawyers or not, that it is because it is the version of the life you want to live. No matter who we all choose to become, it is now more important than ever to use the knowledge we've gained to reject the easy route and instead face the things that challenge us. And most importantly, I hope we all seize the opportunity to live the lives that most excite us. We only have one life. Make sure it's yours. Thank you.
So you've gotten to this point in the video, and I'm sure you're probably thinking to yourself, okay, we get it, you graduated from college, but what are you gonna do now that you actually have your degree? So let's talk about it. So 4 years ago when I started college, I was absolutely certain that I would become an attorney. And even a year ago from today, I would think that by now I would know what law school I was going to and that I had applied to law school, and yeah. But after realizing that being an attorney is definitely not for me, I started having to think about, okay, well, what am I gonna do now that I have this degree, but I don't want to be a lawyer? So for the last couple months, I started thinking about jobs and what I could do, and all of the opportunities that were available to me because I have this degree weren't really exciting, and I didn't really feel like that was right for me. And in the midst of doing all this thinking and trying to figure out what the heck I was gonna do, I sort of just so happened to stumble across this community on YouTube which writes novels and documents the journey of doing that on YouTube. And so I started thinking to myself, like, I could try doing that. I could try writing books. I mean, my whole life going through school, writing had always been my greatest strength and the thing that I liked to do most. Like, I loved reading and writing essays, and even outside of school I have always been a very avid reader. And so when I found this community of writers, I thought to myself, why have I never considered this? I should totally try it. And so at the very end of this last semester of college, I started thinking about, okay, what kind of book do I want to write? And I came up with this kind of science fantasy novel that I really liked the idea of, and I started writing. And then I thought, well, I really want to try making YouTube videos. It was never something I thought about or considered, and even now it's kind of crazy to think that I'm putting videos on the internet for people to watch. But yeah, I wanted to try it, and so I did. And in doing that, I found this other unexpected passion that I really love doing. And so somehow, I mean, it's kind of crazy given the circumstances and the situation, but I just stumbled across these things that I really like, which are obviously writing and making YouTube videos. So, you know, I guess to answer the question, what's next? It's kind of crazy to say, but I guess for me, it's pursuing a career as a published author. And at the same time, I'm gonna be pursuing YouTube full time with the hopes that I can eventually be, you know, self-sustaining and be able to make money doing this. Hello, editing Amelia here. I wanted to film a little segment to put in here because I felt like I did a really poor job of explaining what I meant by this, which is kind of odd because this is one of the most important parts of the whole video. So let me explain what I mean by full time. So currently my channel is still very small, and I'm definitely nowhere near monetization at this point. So I'm still gonna be working a part-time job 3 days a week, but the other 5 days of the week I'm gonna be filming editing and writing. So to me, I'm thinking of it like full time, and then I also have a part-time job, if that makes sense. So yeah, I feel like I did a bad job of explaining that. And also, I just wanted to say, getting monetized on YouTube is no small thing, and it definitely does not happen overnight. So yeah, I definitely don't expect it to be something that happens super quickly, but it is something I'm hoping to be able to do. So yeah, I just wanted to jump in here and explain a little bit better. Okay, back to the main video. Yeah, definitely not what Amelia from a year ago would predict that I would be doing. I can honestly say that I've never in my life felt so optimistic and like excited about something. So yeah, if you made it all the way to this point in the video, comment a little graduation cap, and if you just graduated from college, congratulations, that is a huge accomplishment, and let me know what you're planning to do now that you've graduated. Thank you so much for being here and for watching this video, and cheers to making your dreams come true, because life is too short to not live your own life. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Why the facade to piecing apart back when your brother used to play guitar? We still